No, I'm not. I'm not.
You
I
are
have a
close
bed,
enough.
I have a wife, and I have cats, and I have beer.
I want all of those things.
Colin, can I just ask you a really real question right now?
Go ahead.
How amazing is it being married?
It's pretty cool. Someone always makes you sandwiches. I usually have
You're here. You're here.
That's not really what I was going for.
Oh, which brings me to.
I'm
That's
sure.
amazing.
And
starving, by the way. So that's why it's on my mind.
Oh, yeah. I'm not asking. Oh.
That's awesome. She asked you if you
Good.
wanted food.
Good.
I don't have any.
Alright, what do you see?
Alright.
What I see?
We're at
Prime Minister's concerned.
for a speech not to exceed
The
7
chair has
minutes.
to recognize you, please.
Go.
Alright. Plan is the rest. The Department of Homeland Security should end the Secure Communities Program again. The Department of Homeland Security should end the Secure Communities Program. Who's your copy? Any questions?
Well, thank you.
So, available. Deportation is bad. Arms. First argument is that a lot of people are deported in the status quo. The SCP is a deportation program that collaborates resources and databases to identify criminals, criminal aliens and deport them. Because of ambiguity over who is picked up, this program creates rapid deportation of people. This creates indefinite incarceration of individuals in ICE facilities because these individuals don't have documentation. This means that individuals are, it is justified to make them spend 10 to 15 years in a facility where they are literally, language barriers decrease their ability to communicate about why they're even being deported in the first place. Additionally, if they are not indefinitely incarcerated, they are typically deported to their home country, which means that despite attempts to seek asylum, this is particularly problematic for individuals who survive human trafficking, for economic and political refugees, and for people who are caught up in cartel violence after being enslaved in the production, distribution, or sales part of drug integration into contemporary culture. I think that these populations are particularly problematic because these individuals are individuals who rarely, if ever, did anything wrong in the first place, but are being indefinitely incarcerated or having their ability to have citizenship within the U.S. contested solely because of something that was enormously out of their control. Individuals who are trafficked into a country do not have control over whether or not they came into this country. I think that is fairly intuitive. Second argument. The systematic focus, the system currently focuses on your identity first, which heightens profiling tactics and participation. Literally, participants are taught to identify illegal aliens and how to replicate these profiling tactics and how to bring them to their communities. This happens at local levels, where at local levels, individuals are taught through things like neighborhood watch programs how you identify people who look like they could be dangerous. This is the exact example of the Trayvon Williams looking like someone who could endanger this gated white community. We are literally teaching xenophobia and hate. We are teaching the isolation of bodies that could be problematic and harm actively done against them. Solvency is that we end the SCP, which means that this immediately fractures the first attempt at comprehensive identity-based immigration security programs in the United States. Impact. Deportation is incredibly dehumanizing. Individuals who are deported have no social, economic, or legal support structure within the country from which they are deported or indefinitely or detained for several years. We think this means that these individuals are particularly vulnerable to violence, and their lives are in an infinite state of peril. We think this is especially problematic if you don't have valuable lives and you don't know what will happen next in your life, and there is a language barrier. You are not told what is happening next. You do not get an opportunity to ask what will happen next. There is no value to life in a world where you are indefinitely kept in a prison cell and you can't even communicate about what is happening around you. You literally did nothing wrong. Flint switches. He flips the switch on hateful pedagogy. The phenotypic racial profiling is literally Hitler shit. We think this is a physical identification to determine who is and is not an alien in our country. This exact type of rhetoric is emblematic of the way from which we view immigrants in our country right now. This the failure of this program ensures that we do not invest in this sort of profiling-based security programs in the future. We are literally teaching hate right now, which creates a disposable population as we attempt to purify the population to get rid of the individuals that we deem as a threat to our population, which justifies and kills the same mentality logic of racialization, you can have the flip switched on you, which means that you can become the racialized other. The great example of this is Arab Americans who were considered white until 9/11 when they became a racialized body. This justifies chattel slavery, genocide, and ethnic cleansing as articulated above. That's extinction. I managed it. State rights are bad. Arms? First argument is that state rights are growing to the point of racism and harming the status quo. States are stepping out of line in the face of laws that are focusing on enormous social issues like drug legalization, like gun legalization. New York literally just basically overturned the Second Amendment by stopping the ability to have assault rifles. States are taking their power on things like immigration policy in Arizona and Texas. Even though immigration policy is literally enumerated in federal government policy, we think that this sort of stepping out of states and the status quo is incredibly problematic in terms of the implications that it has on the federal government and in terms of the undermining of the federal government that states are currently doing. The Solvency Plan is a program where the federal government defers authority on immigration policy decisions to the state. These literally, these state-based community program partnerships are gifts given to the state, given to the right to allow them to inject racism into policy making. This manifests in policies like the Gingrich immigration policy, where you have a community of rich white people who decide if you are a Mexican who is rich and white enough to live among them. Any of this sort of partnership signals signals of breaking off of state versus federal power in a huge favor of controlling federal domination, which we think is absolutely critical because state rights are bad. Impact. Contrary to what Ben Dodds wants you to believe, we think that state rights are enormously evil. They create a racial flatter in all aspects of life. First is labor and economy. Delaware has the lowest rates of corporate tax, which means that corporations tend to be based in Delaware because they get taxed there the least, and then they do all of their environmental polluting in Michigan, which has the lowest environmental regulations, which means that they can fuck the environment in Michigan up as much as they want. They do their logging in Oregon because even though the trees are straighter and better in Washington, it is much easier to take advantage of Oregon because there are significantly fewer environmental regulations. They continue to degrade the environment without strong federal laws. This is why people don't get poisoned by lead poisoning. That is a federal mandate, but people still have to deal with slash and burn deforestation policies because that is something that is controlled at the level of the states. We think that we take an ethical stance. We take a statement where some states, the ethical statement that the USFG says right now is that some states allow slave labor, some states allow variation in labor practices. This is the reason why we developed the federal government to prevent shit like this. And the Arizona immigration law is a great example of how when state laws win the day, when state laws reign superior, racism is capable of taking over because we can profile individuals and say that you look like you don't belong here. We think that's wrong.
Okay, we'll move your chair.
No, I'm sitting.
Oh, never mind. Sorry, I was just like, oh, Katie, I need this.
Sorry, we need to.
Sorry. No, thank you. You cannot borrow my chair.
No, I'll just do this.
Okay, sorry, Katie.
No, it's fine. I for some reason thought you had a. Well, that's fine. Okay, just a sec. Sorry. I'll just.
Okay, it's our fault.
This is the right. Okay, sorry, Katie. I've now displaced everything of yours.
Dude, you're displacing my whole existence. There goes
backpacks.
I'm becoming a disposable.
Oh, got you.
Sorry.
I'm becoming the big my daughter.
Oh no!
Welcome to the theater of the real.
Fiona is a illusion.
Okay, we need to start. I'm tired.
All good?
Well, what's the order, Paige?
Well,
Yeah.
the mayor. One off. Ready? The thesis is that our relationship debate, as we have experienced it, is one of hyper-competitiveness and as individuals within the debate space that transmits not only to our social situations, but to debate as a microcosm of how we go through things and how we make sense of our circumstances. The second argument is that game theory forces us to have chance, which requires us to interpret the intent of others and their sincerity. Before the round, Oregon proposed to us to prep together and had complete disclosure. Is that the case?
Yes.
Okay. So this means that although we don't doubt their intentions, we say that the perception is problematic because it securitizes, because it assumes first a position of power that they begin by engaging us. This imperative and requires us to have an imperative to securitize ourselves. The second argument is that they get to claim that because they get having a good intent to do this, but we just say that this is the way the hegemony works now. It uses self-critiques to normalize itself in a way that it requires us to reject things in high stakes. The little c argument is that we propose that we should let the resolution unfold itself to us as debaters. So letting this present itself to us creates a more ethical relationship to the other because we allow that to happen on its own terms and allow it to happen with spontaneity. The link is that their defense of the resolution parallels their benevolent intent to securitize the resolution. The second argument is the topic is about biometric scans, and that this is the case. We argue that this allows the government to do things like absolve its dirty hands of things like immigration, because it can say we're no longer scanning individuals, we're no longer saying you don't belong here, you should leave, but it doesn't account for things like the wall, or it doesn't account for things like border crossers that still die horrible deaths every single day because they have to be brought over to the United States by individuals like coyotes, or create physical barriers, which allows us to both distinguish and select the other as another and use that against them. The next argument is the politicization of the personal correlates to the personality of debate as it expands the jurisdiction of the power not only to the resolution but to the debaters themselves. So we have to give ourselves up personally for judgment of both the judges and the other competitors. The impact to this is that we aren't claiming that the structures in the status quo are good or even desirable. We don't need to win this argument. We just believe that it would have been better if we agreed that our argument structures inform the personal. We control the uniqueness on the debate because in a world where we have hyper-competitiveness, partners turn against each other. Schools have rivalries that result in horrible personal attacks against each other, and individuals are denied a college education because they're not deemed good enough to debate in the college environment because of how hyper-competitive it is. Our argument is that their attempt at the personalization by engaging us is whitewashing the structures that necessitate this type of engagement. This allows their hegemonic assertions to create problems and remake the hyper-competitive environment that we are criticizing. The hyper-competitive environment is really bad because it takes a toll on our personal health. We have extreme stress before rounds. People are shaking before rounds. They are extremely nervous. Individuals in our community have developed high blood pressure and migraines and a myriad of other health problems because of the competitiveness of debate. They have developed coping mechanisms such as smoking or resorting to alcohol or drugs just to cope with the stresses of debate. Our argument, or like the Mile High Plague, anybody? Like, these are all problems that we experience as a result of hyper-competitiveness because we're not willing to take a break because everything matters so much. The impact to this is that it turns case because role-playing does engage the way that we both engage the world and engage the world mentally, which means that we change both the model and the mindset. Our alternative is thus: vote negative to let the resolution open itself to us. Vote negative to let the resolution open itself to us. The thesis of this is that we think that debate structures should not be as hyper-competitive as they are. We believe that spontaneity is the only thing that keeps our event alive. For example, we have the ability to have topic exchange every round. This is the only universal experience that people have. It's suffering and potentiality. Suffering is something that we choose to endure by competing in the activity, but we should be more open-ended to the spontaneity of debate in order to understand our relationship to it. The next argument is we solve the root cause of securitization because we solve the intent to securitize in the first place because we reject the imperative to be first. We reject the drive to be first. The affirmative, the AF will shore up the case. Well, the affirmative will do the same thing as the government because they'll shore up the criticisms against itself and then reclaim them. For example, when the government sees that there's something wrong with it, it takes those criticisms and remakes them into something different. So the structure never has to be acknowledged, but rather the relationship that we have to security is normalized. We cannot live in fear of the unpredictability, but we must rather embrace our precarity and vulnerability by looking to the unknown and natural condition of public speaking. People get very nervous when they're speaking publicly, and that's something that we open ourselves up to. We say that the only way to learn is to not have the fear of securitization and embrace failure and have exposure to it. We believe the ballot is key for two reasons. The first is because we disapprove of the opinion of being first would open up a new model for debate, and we would also win turns into micro-political action arguments because we're taking a stand against that. And we have 2 minutes and 19 seconds left. Andy or myself would be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I have some questions. What exactly is the link that you're making? What exactly did we do that caused the link to this critique?
You create an incredibly competitive atmosphere by necessitating high amounts of prep. It involves things like probably the creation of a wiki that is indicative of policy debating, where you constantly have to prep. People like my boyfriend Ben Menzies end up having to spend all of his hours reading the wiki and ensuring that he has good 2AC blocks to everyone else's 2NC shells and like all those kinds of things. And so by forcing disclosure and joint prepping and disclosure of arguments. Well,
We just say like the imperative to do
Yeah,
that. So like,
because it
okay,
creates the
Bill,
imperative
so
to do that.
Right. What part of the link is predicated off of the discussion we had before the round?
Maybe what part of it?
That was the first, I mean, she raised the first part of the top of the argument that says that we asked before the round if we wanted to collaborate and have a very specific debate on one issue. What, is that part of the link? I didn't understand how that relates to the K.
Well, it's the idea that when we try to create the product before the round, that we try to specify and we try to break down that breaks down the spontaneity of what parliamentary debate is about.
We are criticizing the position to be first, right?
In a world of the alternative, what are you asking the judge to vote for?
We're asking the judge not necessarily even to vote for us, but to embrace the vulnerability of the position that we've put ourselves in, and to embrace the spontaneity of Parley, the vulnerability that Parley uniquely creates.
Okay. So embracing not accepting the ability.
Right. It's the drive to not constantly stress ourselves out over whether or not you were trying to game us in by asking us if we want to disclose and then doing something janky. That creates a stressful environment for us, and we think that kind of model of debate is a bad one.
Will you accept an apology for the way that the 1AC was read?
I mean, I don't think that solves the criticism, but if you want to personally apologize, I'm not personally offended by the way the 1AC was read.
It is going to be a new sheet of paper. It's going to just be a giant overview. There will be things cross-applied everywhere. Sorry. Then it is going to be the alternative. Actually, no. It's just going to be an overview.
Cool, man.
What?
It's a cool.
Alright, let's do this.
First argument that Katie I want to make is a sincere apology if we offended you in any way by asking you before the round if you wanted to collaborate and debate about a specific issue. Our goal at this tournament, Katie and I decided before the tournament that we weren't going to count it for points. This is because of what happened at Mile High, that Katie and I felt overpressured by the activity, and this tournament is our way of breaking loose. We read a lot of strategies that we are not comfortable with. We read a lot of theory. We sparked. We read some yielded good arguments. We did a lot of things that we're not used to. We decided to embrace that type of vulnerability, embrace the vulnerability of not having to win the ballot. I think that this means that the way that Katie and I have debated throughout this tournament is embracing that vulnerability. We're not here to win. We're not here to win. We're here to learn. I think that what we said before the round, we just want to debate you on what you want to debate about. We want to debate you on something that's going to provide education for both of us. That was the only thing that the argument before the debate round was meant to imply. Katie posted a Facebook status, I don't know if you saw it, about how it would be really cool if both teams decided to prep together and just go on some specific issues and really tease out the warrants. I don't think that this in any way has any analysis to policy and what Andy's saying about Ben Menzies, who does compete in policy, not Parley, about having to write infinite types of 2NC blocks. This tournament doesn't have topic areas. We're not asking before the tournament to be able to do this. We're asking within the 20 minutes of prep time, let's combine our knowledge, utilize this focus, and be able to solve that for this issue. I don't think that there's a link to this argument because of the way Katie and I have been debating at this tournament, and I'm very sorry if it appeared that it was. Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that when we talked before the debate, it was just, hey, is there anything you would like to practice? Like, do you want to practice having counterpoint theory debate? Do you want to practice having a type of debate? Like, we presented ourselves vulnerably, like, we'll read whatever you want. We'll let you see our arts.
In addition, the next argument that I would like to make is we are going to advocate that you vote for women in the debate round, but the reasons that we're going to advocate that are kind of different than the reasons that the negative team is going to tell you. We're saying that you should vote affirmative for two reasons. The first reason is to embrace the way that Katie and I let the topic unfold. the way that we read our 1AC, those were the ideas that came to us in prep. We didn't have a file. We didn't go and read one of our generic stock Ks, one of our generic stock positions. We let the resolution unfold and decided to debate about that. I think that the way in which Katie and I engage in the topic about something that is uniquely important to us, such as the structural violence issues that we isolate, is going to be a reason why you should vote affirmative. In addition, our second argument is going to be that debate is good, and that competitive debate is good in some instances, and in a lot of instances actually. So I guess we're going to go to that part of the debate now. Where the first argument is that fiat is good. Katie and I really do believe, and I know we might be beating the horse because I know a lot of people heard this argument before, we really do believe that debating about these issues, Katie and I like to debate about structural violence issues, we like to debate about critical issues, and we really do think that this is creating the type of education, and even when we're debating about structural violence, it's creating the type of education that allows us to understand how policies that the United States federal government enacts uniquely affect individuals within the country. Katie and I believe that that this is an instance of personal responsibility. We do debate because we want to be, it forces us to read the news. We parlay because it forces us to read the news, and we can't just read the K all the time like we do in policy. We do this because we think that it's important for us to be responsible decision makers. We do this because we think that it's important for us to be responsible voters, to understand the issues that are happening. I have gained more education through one debate tournament than I have gained in single one of my classes. And I think that the ability to cross-examine, the ability to compete ideas and the competitive drive to compete ideas, to constantly be looking for the better warrant, to constantly be looking for the smarter position, for the law argument that makes the most sense. I think that this challenges us. I think that this makes us try to force ourselves to be more knowledgeable, which allows ourselves to become better policymakers. This is a real of education. We understand ways different policies are affected. We understand different ways that policies affect us through the different ways that debate happens, and I think that that's important for us to be independent policymakers, which is really key to Katie and I's independent lives. It makes us happy when we're capable of being responsible and good at responsible citizens. The next argument I want to make, you make this argument at the bottom of the flow. Sorry, Colin, you're going to have to cry around again. You make this argument at the bottom of the flow that says that it increases. Let me get to that at the end, actually. Okay. What else do we hear, Katie? I'm going to go back to that first point that I made under the permutation debate. That says that the way that Katie and I specifically endorse the resolution is uniquely good. Their alternatives vote negative to let the resolution open itself to us. The permutation text and the advocacy that Katie and I will be going for in this debate round is to vote affirmative to support the way that Katie and I let the resolution unfold itself and to embrace the vulnerability that we bring to the debate rounds. I think that it's possible to do both of these things. I think it's possible to have a drive for education, which is striving to increase programs, and which is striving to increase programs, striving to increase education. I think that is good, and I think you can do that while embracing vulnerability. That's one of the things that I like about Parley. I don't know what's going to happen, which means that I often give most of my MGs without any prep at all. Similarly, like I'm giving this MG without any prep at all. I think that vulnerability is an inherent part of the activity, and allowing us to read this type of app where we don't have blocks is going to be that. I think that political action is good. I want to address the hyper-competitive arguments that they make at the bottom of the flow. You make hyper-competitive arguments about how this causes college students, and this causes us to do things like smoke excessively, have high blood pressure, have high tension, have binge drinking, whatever. I think you're misunderstanding the root cause. I think that with or without debate, I'm going to have incredibly high levels of stress. I think that this is proven by the fact that I had them before I started the debate. I think this is proven. I don't think that this would be able to solve anything. If I wasn't doing debate, I could find another outlet to be able to be competitive. I played sports in high school. I did that sort of thing. That's not going to solve any type of competition, which means you're not going to be able to solve for any of the terminal impacts of these stress arguments. In addition, I think that in my personal experience, I think that debate really actually solves for stress. Debate has always allowed me to have an escape. If something is bothering me, if something's going wrong in my life, I can work on debate, I can write files, I can let my mind get off of these things. I think that this is a positive form of coping. Instead of doing something like binge drinking, or instead of doing drugs to simply get my mind off of something, I do debate. It gets my mind off of something, it makes me feel like I've accomplished something, which gives me a sense of self-worth, which then allows me to go back to my problems and solve them in a brighter light, allows me to have a better outlook in life. In addition, debate makes me excited. I like debate. I think that that's an independent reason why happiness. debate that we do makes Katie and I happy. I think that this is going to be the internal link. In addition, you say that this drive means that people don't get college educations. I don't think that this is true. I think that there are a lot of people that get scholarships to debate programs that alternatively wouldn't have had an option to go into high school. Additionally, I think that being competitive in debate gives you a lot of options. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but I was going to transfer at the beginning of the year. And the reason that I was going to be able to transfer and the reason that I was going to be able to, there were some issues of discrimination happening on our team. The reason I was going to be able to transfer is because another school was going to give me a scholarship to go there for the next 2 years, which made it financially possible. I think that this type of competitive debate and Katie and I's personal experience is capable of solving. In addition, you say it increases partner dilemmas. Katie and I have grown so close to the debate, and she's helped me with my life. I don't think that's true.
Also, it's like our best friend school.
Yeah.
Don't disagree, guys.
60 watt.
Are you gonna scratch me
I mean, good luck.
I'm just going to talk a little bit, guys. You feel free to, write some arguments down, do what you want to do, man. Embrace the vulnerability.
I don't know where to put anything. I'm so stressed out right now.
Oh, yes. An interesting term.
I'm just gonna throw your speech straight down on this paper.
That's what I did your speech, so
Okay,
that's
okay.
probably the way to do it.
Okay, let's do it.
Is everyone ready? First, I'd like to actually just thank Katie and Megan for listening to our criticism, listening to the way that we've discussed this topic, and I'd especially like to thank them for their apology, although it was certainly not necessary. This is not an argument about why we felt the way that you approached this round was offensive necessarily, but the way that you approach trying to game the way that you attempt to game debate and create a sort of game theory rationality where there are always further attempts to securitize our own resources, like having non-hackable debate information servers. Whitman sort of embraces a vulnerability of this. In particular, when we donated a bunch of our files to the Startup of Oregon's policy debate team. Right. So like that kind of embracement of vulnerability is what we're asking you to approach in the round. And so voting affirmative doesn't really affect the way that they embrace vulnerability, right? So they say that by reading a topic app that they don't have pre-written blocks to, they have embraced the vulnerability of the topic. This is not true, and we have there's a sequencing problem with these sort of permutation arguments, in that they attempted to, before the round, create an environment in which there was disclosure and the pre-preparing of arguments, and sort of a transition to a more policy kind of focus on the activity, where there is a focus on pre-preparing, there's a focus on sharing information between competitors, and that is what ends up creating these kinds of high-stress environments where you constantly have to be working on your GNC blocks, you constantly have to be updating your files, and the great thing about Parley, and especially non-topic area tournaments, is that it allows us to have an opportunity to sort of experience the world as it comes to us, right? Because the topic areas are never going to be the same from year to year. We get new and updated topics, and that sort of model of debate is basically what we're endorsing. That the way that the affirmative was presented sort of disagrees with that basic premise. So they have also made a couple of these like fiat good arguments. Our argument is not necessarily even that fiat is bad or that we shouldn't talk about these kinds of things, but simply that the model of debate that was proposed before the round discourages that kind of debate, actually, because I don't know if you guys know this much about policy, but the policy community is much more policy debate centric. They're much less focused on the personal politics of each debater. They're focused far more on competitive success and generally just being dicks to each other, which is why I ended up switching communities, honestly. I was a policy debater for Whitman, and that sort of environment that fosters really creates a lot of problems for both your social life and your personal life generally, where you just don't feel included in a community, you don't feel motivated by that community. So so the permutation has a couple problems with it, so I guess we'll talk about that now for a second. The first argument is class masking argument. By voting AF, you allow them to hide the problems that exist in the hyper-competitive mentality created by the pre-round discussion, and in particular the way in which these kinds of arguments get deployed. But also, it never just goes away, right? According to Nicolas Cage, the psychological violence that has been done has already occurred pre-round, where we constantly second-guessing ourselves on what their intentions for the question for what their proposition would entail. Not necessarily that we even think that they necessarily want to hurt us or damage us in any way, because I certainly don't think that Katie and Megan are really good friends of mine. I really appreciate them, love having them around. But that sort of like game theory where there's an attempt to be first to confront the problem or to I'm trying to think about how to say this page.
The attempt to first establish the rules of the game is the game theory, right? It makes us second guess their intentions. It makes us think about every possible thing, and it puts us in an impossible position. Either we say yes and something happens, or we say no, but that still affects our relationship because ultimately this is a competition.
Right. So I think all of Page's arguments are pretty appropriate here in this situation, but also let's see. I have some other things written down somewhere. The fact that they made the first move on this is a sufficient link to the criticism for a couple of reasons. The first is those game theory arguments that I isolated above, but all of the arguments about why they create a good kind of education are tainted by the same logic of security, where they attempt to secure themselves from the spontaneity of parliamentary debate. They say some of these kind of stress inevitable arguments we don't solve the root cause. First off, they're probably right, but the question of the debate is how we interact with the debate space, how we conceptualize debate, and how we can make debate a less stressful, less hyper-competitive environment. I don't know if you all know Mike Selk, but I think this is a pretty good example of how the hyper-competitive aspects of debate can make people can create personal attacks and create really bad personal politics, where we both demonize Mike Selk, but also Mike Selk demonizes us, and it creates a sort of clash between the competitors and destroys a fostering of competitiveness or a quality competitive atmosphere and an atmosphere that promotes sincerity and culture. What's
I would just like to say I feel uncomfortable bringing myself into this debate round. I feel like he's been trash for the community, and he has been nothing but kind to me. That's
exactly our argument. Is that the hyper-competitive atmosphere is what creates the demonization of Mike Selk, right? The only reason that people feel that way about him is because of the way that debate forces him to be sort of abrasive at times. And I agree with Megan, honestly. I've had nothing but nice interactions with Mike Selk. He's never personally been a dick to me, but I know plenty of people that dislike him. But that's basically our argument, right? And this basically feeds into an underlying anxiety where, yes?
Our argument is that the securitization leads to things like what the government does to mask real issues, right? We claim to solve them, but really we just foster environments that perpetuate the same circumstances. The kind of hyper-competitive environment ends up fostering the same kind of atmosphere that the state creates in terms of securitizing it, attempting to categorize the body. Let's see. Yes, all of their arguments about why debate is good or a coping mechanism or happiness are probably solved by the alternative, because we create a better debate, basically. The debate system that they exist in, while it maybe creates some happiness, we're saying that there is a chance to improve that. There's a chance to make it an atmosphere where we don't have demonization, where we have an acceptance of people, and we have an embracing of the vulnerability and spontaneity of parliamentary debate and the lack of topic areas, the uniqueness that Parley brings to us. So, thanks guys for listening. Okay, well, we'll first be, There will be an overview and then an overview of the overview's overview. So
Your overviews on
Good
overviews
dog.
on
Yo, dog. Here's like
Yo, dog.
overviews.
I heard good overviews.
I am ready to begin when you all are. First of all, I too would like to thank everybody for engaging in this wonderful experiment with us and giving us an opportunity to talk about some of the issues that we find very important to the community. Obviously, you two are some of my very best friends in the community, and I'm really glad that we have the opportunity to discuss the community that we virtually spend most of our lives in if we're not like sleeping or maybe doing school if we have some time. So our argument is that this is precisely the problem. The debate has turned into a game in which we can't trust our community. We can't trust each other because we have to gauge everybody's interactions as, is this a political move? Is this a move to win our strategy? This is our argument, that it's problematic that our community has become the way it has. That's why we're taking a stand against it. Our argument is that our community is turning into the government that we criticize so much, that we claim to be self-reflexive, but really we just use strategies in order to preemptively be first, in order to make our critiques of ourselves normalized. We can claim that we're making changes, but really we just stay the same. That's our argument about hyper-competitiveness, that we actually need to change the way the debate functions. Let's go down to the link level, just for some clarification. We articulate that, for example, with this topic, biometrics allows the government to say, hey, we're not deciding who can be here and who can't, but they don't ever address the issues of having a wall or having border crossings that still lead people to die horrible deaths. This is our argument about debate. The games theory and hyper-competition and the idea that debate is fun and that it provides us with more opportunities allows us to mask over the real issues that leave us sick, stressed out, and hating each other, when really we should have a community that is fostering love and fostering an intellect that allows us to have these critical discussions and that allows us to actually compete in a way that is healthy. Our argument is that we need personal connections to debate that don't force us to give up, that we're already being forced to be vulnerable, but we shouldn't have to put ourselves on the line to the extent of having health problems associated with it. Our argument is that we control the uniqueness on the debate structure, and this is the argument I think you're going to be voting for. That partners fight with each other when you see somebody lose a round. If you've ever, I'm sure you all have been to nationals, but it's awful when people lose their last round because people literally sometimes don't talk to each other for days. Our argument is that schools start to compete with each other to the point where we can't have healthy relationships with some of our very best friends, both in real life and
And I think it drives other schools out of the activity.
yeah, and it does drive other schools out of the activity. If you can recall the appeals process a couple years ago, that was problematic because it shut down a debate program. Our argument is that the hyper-competitive nature of debate precludes people from going to college because they have to be good enough to get in. While I am very happy that Megan had the opportunity to transfer, I think we also have to recognize that some of the problems with hyper-competitiveness is that people aren't going to get the opportunities that we all have and think are so wonderful, especially because we all love debate. Our argument is that by voting negative, we can let the resolution unfold itself to us and that we can change the authoritative voice that's teaching us how to behave and the mechanisms that we're supposed to use to cope, which are unhealthy. We should have spontaneous interactions. We should not have to shore up claims about how we can't ever challenge our structure. We should take a stand against it. And while Andy and I both applaud you for taking risks and being vulnerable, our argument is that the games theory is still embedded in that type of approach because it requires us to have strategy, right? This is the final round. We had to have a discussion about what we were going to do, whether or not we were going to make it as competitive as possible, exchange as many arguments as possible, or whether we were going to do something different. Putting us in those types of binds makes it impossible for us to ever have connections to each other that are meaningful. We agree that it's a great idea for us to be vulnerable, but our argument is we need to do it in a healthy way so the poly community can be embraced in what it is good for, making friends and having personal connections, not a microcosm of sickness and an area where we can't ever have genuine bonds because we always second guess each other's intentions. That was our point of the criticism.
I can only read that with one eye.
Oh. You don't need to bring this bit around here.
This should be fine. Okay. Sorry, I have to take one of my contacts out.
Okay,
So
I want to raise
I can only read with one eye, so I'm just okay. Alright. I would like to say that I have an understanding of debate that would allow me to be able to tell tell you why you would be voting F and why you would be voting neg in this discussion. I don't think that discussions result in a winner and a loser, which makes it really difficult for me to give an overview saying you are voting for the University of Oregon. But I mean, I don't know what happens when you vote neg, and I don't know what happens when you vote F. I thought my 1AC was gonna happen, but I guess that's not true. Yeah, okay. I think that Megan at least gives you like a way to try and resolve this. That you vote F if you believe that the way that we embrace how the topic unfolded was correct, or that you believe that competitive debate can be good sometimes. Like I think that you guys are right. Like policy debate has a lot of problems with it, with hyper-competitiveness. Policy debate creates a mentality where you like have to have the best arguments, which only happens if you don't shower for 10 days because you're too busy playing cards, Aaron Hardy. Like, I mean, that's the sort of hyper-competitiveness that happens in policy, but I mean, like, I'm sure you understand as someone who's done policy and Parley, like, it's different in this activity. Like, we hang out after rounds. The competitiveness in policy versus Parley is really different. And I think that a lot of the issue of hyper-competitiveness can be solved by discussions at a brand where you're capable of humanizing people, where people are not the arguments that they post on the wiki. I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding about the discussion that we had before the debate. Before the debate began, we approached Paige and Andy and we said, hey, you guys, we're not counting this tournament for points. We don't have anything at stake. So if you want us to read a certain strategy, if there's something you want to practice, like if you want a K debate, if you want a theory debate, we'll have that debate with you because, I mean, we care about you guys. Like, we want you to be able to practice what you want. And I feel like there's maybe like a misunderstanding about this because I feel like the way that you're characterizing what we said to you was like, we're trying to force you to make a wiki, and that's not what we were ever trying to do. We were just trying to say, like, this debate is a unique instance. We are not counting this for points. We're like vulnerable with them. We told them we'll tell you what we're going to say, and you guys can write answers to it. We will help you write answers to it if you want. Like, I mean, I just don't really understand where you're coming from on that in particular. On most of this stuff, I'm like right on point with you guys. But okay, I think if we are winning arguments about why competitive debate can be good in instances, then that is a reason why you should vote for it. I think that competitive debate can be good because it is productive. Megan tells you that this sort of stress is inevitable, that if we didn't have the coping mechanism of a debate round, we would do other things. We would drink on our own, we would smoke on our own. I am a molecular biology major. Stress is inevitable in my life. I'm going to be a surgeon. Debate is an excellent coping mechanism for me, for Megan, for a lot of people in this activity, because the competitiveness in debate is what inspires us to do the amount of research that we do. And it's not about just like putting a bunch of arguments on the wiki, and it's not about having the most things to say because like that's not really what Parley is. That's policy debate. Like that's the difference between Parley and policy. In Parley, you like hang out with people at parties and you like Facebook them and you text them and you see each other before rounds and you see each other while you're on Christmas break. And my Parley friends are like some of my best friends in the whole world. Like I don't hate anyone in the community. And some of the people that like are most meaningful to me are people that have come from breaking down the hyper-competition in this work because the level of competition in this activity is not to such a degree of hyper-competitiveness that people were accessible and people could be humanized, people were more than just their arguments. And I think that that is a delineation between Parley and policy that gets conflated in this debate. The competitive debate can be good because it can be a good outlet, and that Parley has not escalated to the hyper-competitiveness level that I think is being a little bit misrepresented. Yeah, Megan?
Do you want to talk about the education level?
Oh yeah, sure. And also, like, Parley is good for like the amount of education. I think that like I get all sorts of education from Parley that I wouldn't get normally. Like I read the news only before debate tournaments. Like starting 3 weeks before the debate tournament, I start reading the news, and I've taken one philosophy class, but we read the K in almost every single debate. I've read one philosophy book, but Megan has made this accessible to me, and that only happened because of competitive debate. funny.